Hey y'all, this is Joseph with 3D Sourcerer. Today I'm going to be showing you how to assemble this. This is the ARC for the Bambu Lab P1P 3D printer. It was designed by ThrutheFrame, and the reason that you want an enclosure around your printer is to increase the temperature around the print bed so that you can print parts like ABS and PTG without warping, and also reduce the noise that the printer makes. So we'll also test out to what extent the enclosure actually helps with that as well during this video. So we actually have been able to partner with the designer ThrutheFrame to offer this as a kit on Amazon. So in our kit, we're going to include the plexiglass, the bolts, the brass inserts, the magnets, the bearings, the foam tape, basically everything on the bill of materials that you need to complete this build will be included in our kit, other than a roll of filament. So you can pick out whatever color filament you want from whatever your favorite brand is, but other than that, if you buy our kit, you should be able to assemble this build. So wanted to mention that, and we're also, since we partnered with ThrutheFrame, he does get a portion of each sale. So by buying our kit, you're supporting the original designer of the build. So hope that y'all consider it, and you know, we wouldn't have partnered with ThrutheFrame if we didn't like the build. We thought that it was really well done, and I think that he deserves a lot of credit because he spent a lot of time on it. You can tell just by assembling it how it looks that he spent a lot of time and put a lot of thought into it. So thank you ThrutheFrame for partnering with us. We really appreciate it, and hope that y'all consider buying the kit. It should be available in March 2023, and if it is available, the link will be down below in the description. Hope that y'all enjoy the video. Thank y'all for watching.
So to show you all the before and after effects of an ARC enclosure, I did a test print with and without the ARC. In both examples, I have the printer in the same position, and both prints have the loud aux fan on the default settings. For both prints, I took the readings at exactly 60 minutes remaining to try and standardize everything. Here's the first print where you can see the volume averaged around 72 decibels. Now compare that with the ARC where the volume is in the low 60s, which is a noticeable difference since decibel readings aren't on a linear scale. Now for the thermal camera. Without the ARC, the temperatures averaged in the low 80s without any uniform heat around the plate. With the ARC, the temperature jumps to the 90s to 100s even when printing in PLA, which has lower temperature settings than PTG and ABS. Here's another angle where you can see a big difference with heat retention with the ARC installed. Before we get started with the build, I wanted to give you all 10 tips for assembling the ARC that I learned the hard way so that you won't make some of the same mistakes. Number 1, read the instructions. ThrutheFrame made a detailed assembly manual that will be helpful in addition to this video. He updates the manual regularly based on feedback, so it is a good resource that stays up to date with the current version of the ARC. Number 2, don't sweat it. If you drop a brass insert or a bolt and you can't find it, don't spend a lot of time looking for it. We have a lot of extras, and the vacuum cleaner will do a great job picking those up for you at some point. Number 3, brass inserting 101. If you have a soldering iron similar to mine, the tip might be a little small and could puncture through the printed part. Add a second brass insert to the soldering tip to make placing the inserts a lot easier. Number 4, which hinge to use. There's confusion about the hinges and mounting the door depending on which way it swings, so hopefully this clip clears that up a little bit. There are 2 types of hinges, and essentially what that is you know, if you're looking at the door, this is the door, it would swing like that. And the difference between the hinges is where this hole is located. So once you get ready, you put the dowel rod through there, and now it obviously rotates. And the idea, what ThrutheFrame is trying to emphasize here, is that you can do a quick release of the door, and the way that you would do that is to have the dowel rod on the top. And something that I wanted to briefly suggest would be to kind of do this a little bit to break up anything that might be in there, so you can kind of play around with it, break up any extra plastic that's in the holes there so that it kind of slides in easy. And the reason behind that is the magnets can act as a quick release mechanism for this, so you want this hole to be on the top. So if you're looking at the door, you want the hole to be up here. So obviously if you have the door swinging the other way, so you'd have to rotate it like this, and the door, you know, would swing like this. But as you can see, the dowel rod falls out. So that's the differences. As I mentioned, this one I'm printing is the door is opening from the right, so the hinges are on the left side if you're looking at the enclosure. So imagine my hand, this hand over here is the door is opening like that if you're looking at it. Number 5, removing brass inserts. A couple of the inserts that I added to the plastic pieces got some plastic inside of them and onto the threads, which caused the bolts to not thread into the insert correctly. The good news is that it's pretty easy to just reheat the brass insert with your soldering iron and remove the insert. No reason to panic. Make sure you let the new insert cool before screwing in the bolt, or the whole insert might spin in the melted plastic. Number 6, bolt removal. There are some bolts that should be removed before adding the back columns. The manual was recently updated to specify this, but hopefully this clip will help. Alright, so another thing I wanted to point out to everybody is that this is on the back here, and a lot of these screw or bolt holes, like this one here, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it or not, but there's actually a bolt inside of that bolt hole. So if you're intending to use all of these, there's another one here, another one here. I kind of got carried away and put these on and realized that there's actually bolts already in there, so now you can't really take it out with having this on. So I have to take this off so I can access that bolt to remove it, and then put the plate back on, and then obviously attach it again. So just be careful that you don't forget to remove some of these. That way you don't have to go back and redo some stuff. It's important because I actually started by putting it up over here on the side, and I didn't even look back here. So that's why I had to take it all the way off. So just want to prevent y'all from having to do any extra work. Number 7, the quick release mechanism. In order to make sure the quick release mechanism on the door works well, check out this clip. Really quickly, I'll demonstrate the quick release mechanism. We got some spare magnets over here. I'll kind of keep those out of the way before they mess up my thing. I'm just gonna move this out of the way for a second. So if you're looking at the door, put this in here. And if you need a lot of access, or if you want to clean the printer or whatever, you can take the door off really easily. So there's a lot of extra magnets in the kit. So you just put this on top and kind of pull up, and now you can imagine the door comes off. So that is what is meant by the quick release mechanism. It's really easy. And obviously if you print the right hinges, since gravity would be pushing this way and there's no hole on that side, then the door is free to swing like this. So just want to go through that really quickly. It's not that complicated, but just want to make sure no one was confused about that, and hopefully that clears up any questions about it. Number 8, how to prevent scratches on the plexiglass. One tip for preventing scratches on the plexiglass is to only remove enough of the covering to access the bolt holes during assembly, so you don't accidentally scratch the plexiglass. Number 9, remove the plexiglass covering in one piece. So a quick tip I wanted to mention as far as removing the paper from the plexiglass. People struggle with this sometimes, and figured out this kind of over the years, but if you pull straight up, it kind of tends to tear sometimes, especially on the 3mm one. So if you kind of pull like almost at an angle away, so don't pull like this, pull kind of like at a acute angle, it tends to keep everything together so that you can kind of take it all off in a single piece. It's a little more difficult this way, but it also comes off in a single piece, so you're not having to like, try again a lot. So thought that might help some of y'all. Number 10, filament rerouting. In order to add the sealing to the ARC, you have to reroute the PTFE plastic tube that guides the filament to the extruder. The PTFE tube adapter print is a separate print from the ARC Enclosure. I'll link it down below. There are two versions of the adapter, with one specifically made for the P1P cable chain. Unfortunately, Bambu Lab has stopped selling the P1P version of the cable chain, which is different from the X1C version. We do recommend purchasing it once it's available again. A bonus tip is if you're having trouble pushing the tube through the adapter, use some needle nose pliers to open up the hole a little. This made it a lot easier for me to push the tube through the adapter.
And as far as the tools you need to assemble this, you really shouldn't need much more than an Allen wrench, which will be included in the 3D Sourcerer kit, and then a soldering iron. And I purchased my soldering iron just from Amazon. This was one that seemed to have pretty good reviews. I'll include it in the link down below, but I feel like any soldering iron will work.
My primary filament was the white from Bambu Lab that came included in the P1P kit, and then I used Perfect Yellow from Atomic Filament for the accent. And then you also need to have some scissors handy just to cut the foam tape when you install the rear panel. We also made an ARC organizer kit based on the bill of materials from ThrutheFrame. This is just so that you can get all your fasteners organized before you start the assembly process. So maybe this will make it easier for some of y'all. It's completely optional, so feel free to skip over this if you want, but maybe it'll make it a little more straightforward when you're assembling everything. And since we're on the Printables page, I want to thank everyone for all the downloads. We actually reached the perimeters threshold for a free roll of filament, so we're going to be giving that back to the community. So make sure you're subscribed to us and follow us on social media for updates on that. And thank you all so much for all the support. For the M3x4 PTFE tube bolts, you do need to get those out of the extra parts that were sent with your P1P. If you can't find these, you can also use some of the bolts that you'll remove from the back of the P1P.
So this is a view of all the printed parts for the ARC. Just want to go through them real quickly. This is optional, all the fasteners kind of arranged. Print if you want, if you don't, no problem. This is the test print to test your print quality. You can see that this little clip goes in to that and then clips together there. I'll go through that more in a second. And this is to relieve some of the tension on the hot end. So just a disclaimer, I didn't install this on my P1P because ThrutheFrame mentioned that he was going to update this design relatively soon. So by the time you're watching this, this might be outdated. So just use whichever version is the most updated version of this part. And then these are kind of the main components. This is the bottom. The reason that you can tell that, if you just look for the little overhang there, the little shelf design, and that matches up here with that. So, you know, this is going to kind of slide in like that when you were assembling everything. And if you're looking at the printer, this is the left side for me, and then this is the same thing on the top. Shannon will, or ThrutheFrame will send you a serial number for your ARC if you send him a printed off version, or printed off picture of it, and that goes right here like that. So I think that's a nice little touch that he added to it. This is the hinges for the door here. This goes right there, and then on the other side you have these little kind of latch type things that will have magnets in them that kind of snap on to the door, or to the opposite side of the frame. And then this is the door handle that goes to the plexiglass. And then this is kind of obviously the right side if you're looking at it, has the ARC logo up there, and you can use the other side if you want, but that's what that looks like. And then here is the pieces to kind of hold the ceiling piece in place. These go on top, kind of around the perimeter. Another quick disclaimer is that you only need one of these long pieces. I realized that after the fact, but I just somehow printed off an additional one. I think it was during some testing with ThrutheFrame that I accidentally printed an extra one, so you should only have one of these. And then here is the filament holder. Shannon made this through the frame. Shannon is his other name, so sorry about that. But this is something that you can add to the printer to put your filament roll on the side, make it a little bit easier accessible. And then we have the bearings that will go into that to help it roll a little bit easier. And then this is the back piece where the filament tube goes out, and these are the parts that you put, right in there for moving the way that the filament runs out. And you do that so that you can add the sealing to the P1P. So that's just all the parts. I wanted to show that to everybody, and then I'll work on this little sample part here just to make sure I know what I'm doing. I've actually never soldered before, or I've never used brass inserts before, so it'll be a learning experience for me as well. So I'll show y'all what happens.
So I initially set the soldering iron to 250 degrees because I knew that that would melt the PLA, which if you think about it, we print at 220 degrees usually. So ultimately increase the temperature to 350 just to increase the speed that the brass inserts would melt the plastic. But if you want to start low and then kind of increase as you get more comfortable, I think that's a good way to do it if you've never done this before. And then here's where I install the test print.
Yeah, a nice little snap. That feels really good. You can barely see the seam there. ThrutheFrame did a really good job kind of optimizing all this, and I think that looks really good. And so now the next thing to do would be to practice putting in these brass inserts here. Alright, so everything's heated up, got the brass insert, and don't know the best way to do this. Obviously it's pretty hot, but if you're really careful you can kind of slip it on there, and then I'm test it out doing this.
So just to clarify, this is before I learned about the double insert method that I described in one of the tips. Basically you want to add another brass insert so that the tip of the soldering iron doesn't stick out so far, because when you start pushing the brass insert into the plastic, the tip kind of sticks out and that can puncture through the back of the plastic piece, which you don't want that to happen. So I included this just because I wanted to show that this is my first attempt at inserting a brass insert with a soldering iron, and if you've never tried it before, it's not that hard, so don't feel intimidated by it.
Just kind of sinks down in there, and I think that worked. See if it can focus a little better. If you didn't see that, I think that pretty self-explanatory. You just kind of push it down, and this one actually probably could go down a little bit further. There it goes. And I think that's in a good spot. Kind of see it's at least flush with that. And then need to do this one really quick.
I recommend that you practice on this piece, but there's a high likelihood that you'll eventually make a mistake on the actual ARC enclosure parts just because there's a lot of inserts, and if you do make a mistake, don't sweat it. It's pretty easy to remove the brass insert and insert a new one, and I did this a couple of times and really couldn't even tell that I changed it, so don't worry too much about that. So at this point I was ready to move on to the actual ARC part, so here I'm just inserting all the brass inserts using the organizer, and you can see just slowly the number of brass inserts dwindling down, so that's kind of satisfying to see.
Alright, so I got done with the left side. I wanted to show this really quick as well. So this one is one of the two that is at a 70-degree angle. It's hard to tell with the camera, but you basically just want to push it kind of back towards this wall. I think is the correct direction to push that particular one. It's not a 90-degree to the surface, so just be aware of that. ThrutheFrame points it out in the assembly manual, but just wanted to show it in person. And then I think we're ready to assemble these now. So there we go. Fits great. Do the other one real quick. was going to try to time the time it took me to put the brass inserts in, but once I got the double set up, that really sped things up, so consider using that. I increased the temperature to 350 as well, so that helped some too once I got a little bit more confident. So these went together well, and now I just need to do this other one over here. So now I start adding the brass inserts to the rest of the pieces. So this is the other side panel pieces. And then I transition to the rear panel here on the front and back of that. And now I'm adding the inserts to the hinges and the doorknob. And then this is the filament holder, which also has a brass insert in the end of it. Then I just go on and assemble the rest of the filament holder here. So add the bearing, and then this is the roller of the filament holder. The bearing kind of sits inside of that. And then I add this side piece that has a bolt that goes through it that threads into that brass insert that we added earlier. Don't forget this little spacer that goes on the back of the filament holder so that it fits on the P1P correctly. So now moving on to adding the magnets to the hinge. You can see here I'm getting the magnet out of the organizer there, and it's just a press fit magnet, so just push it into place. And for the second magnet, it's really important to make sure that they are attracting each other, so I just put the other magnet on top, and that gave me the direction that I was supposed to put it in. I thought that it might kind of just fit in like that, but I ended up having to take it off and press fit it in off camera. I thought that I might need to use glue just because they're pretty strong, but I haven't had any issues with them so far, so I'm just going to leave them without glue for now, and if they start popping out, I'll just add some glue later on. Next, I add the magnets to the latches. You can see the two latches there, and then here is where I'm adding the magnets to the actual column that has the magnets there in the center, and made sure that the magnets were attracting each other to the latches so that the latches will latch correctly. So be sure that you're careful with that. It'd be really annoying to try to get these magnets out, so I'd recommend double checking that before moving on. So since we just put on the door latches, thought I might as well just go ahead and put the hinges on. It's going to take a second, so I'm going to do that now. I think now is a great time to add the hinges. I would not advise you to add the plexiglass door at this point because it would get scratched really easily, but I think the hinges are fine for now. Alright, so at this point we have everything together as much as we can. We put together the filament holder over here. These will go on towards the end, and then we assembled the panels as much as we can without the printer. And then just wanted to mention briefly, this is kind of the accessory optional set, and these two brass pieces go with the name tag. I'm not doing the name tag today. It's an optional piece that you can do if you want to, but so basically you should be done putting in all the brass inserts now. So that's where we're at in the process. Next thing I want to do is to reroute the PTFE tube, and we'll use these to do that, as well as these. So show you that next. Alright, so I was having a pretty hard time getting this through there, and then I just took some needle nose pliers here, just kind of reamed it out a little bit, not too much on both sides, kind of like that. And now it seems like it's doing a lot better. There we go. So that part of the adapter actually goes on the inside of the printer like that, and then this smaller piece goes on the outside, and the tube goes through both of them, as you can see there. One thing to note is that you can attach these together with the two bolts, but I would not attach it to the printer, because if you attach it to the printer now without adding that back plate first, you're just going to have to take it back off and then add the back plate and then screw it back on. So just leave it loose, kind of like that. Before you start adding these parts to the printer, make sure that at all the holes that there aren't any bolts in the holes. It's really annoying to put this on from the side and then figure out once you get to the back that there's a bunch of bolts in the holes and you have to take everything back off and start over again. So just trying to save you some time on that. So after you double check the back and make sure that there aren't bolts in the holes, now it's time to start the assembly. I started from the bottom and kind of worked my way up, but it doesn't really matter. And just make sure that you pay attention to the
Build instructions, there are a couple places that require longer bolts than others, but they're pretty easy to identify, so just reference that for more information. This is the part that I mentioned earlier where you have to have the faceplate on before you add the bolts. So here's where I'm adding the bolts. You can see how if the bolts are already there, you have to take them out and then add them back after the faceplate's put on. So now you can add the filament holder once you have all the panels on there. So just take out those 2 bolts and then add 2 bolts back, but make sure they're the 8mm and 10mm ones as specified. Don't forget to add these 2 bolts on the inside. They're both by the hinges, one's higher and then one's lower, and there's also some on the opposite side. So after I got all the big pieces installed, I added these smaller yellow pieces that hold the top panel in place. These are the L-shaped ones, and then the back is that long one, and then 2 of the straight ones. So the L's go on the side, as you can see there. So at this point, the only thing that's missing is some plexiglass. So now's a good time to clean the printer if you want to, and then we start adding the plexiglass panels. So this is me measuring the foam tape, so I just try to kind of estimate the length, and you can leave it a little long if you want to, and always cut it shorter as you need it. And it just has adhesive on the back, and now I'm just making sure it fits all right and adding it to the printer. Once you install it, it should look pretty similar to this. You can see the foam tape down at the bottom has a nice little seal, and everything fits pretty well. So now I just add the rest of the plexiglass panels. You can see that I try to use that tip that I mentioned where I only remove the part of the protective covering that I need to, so I don't scratch anything on accident. And then here I am adding the door. So I added the roof, pretty straightforward. Just add the handle and then lay it on there. Fits pretty good. Now I gotta add the finishing touches. If you want your own serial number for your ARC enclosure, you have to take a picture of the completed enclosure and send it to ThrutheFrame on his Printables profile, and then he'll send you an STL of the serial number. If you enjoyed the ARC enclosure build, please consider leaving a make and a review on ThrutheFrame's Printables profile. It really helps him out a lot. I'll end this marathon of a YouTube video with some good old 3D printing on the Bambu Lab P1P 3D printer with the ARC enclosure build designed by ThrutheFrame. Thank you so much for watching.